Hey there, my name is Dawn. I am going to take the next few minutes to answer some of the questions that we had this week about lesson plans and some different differentiated instruction that we had posted in the group. So I wanted to take a few minutes because several of our questions focus a little more on the lesson planning and how to have let's see. Well, I'll just read it to you. Ultimately, one of the questions just said, I have seventh and eighth grade classroom grade levels in my class. How do you create lesson plans that aren't 10 pages long, that aren't time consuming and overwhelming? Um, so as well as like not having to pay for a ton of different programs. So I wanted to take some time today to just kind of run through not only an example of, well, I want to talk about curriculum mapping because I feel like if you take time at the beginning of the year to do that, it really lessens the amount of time you're having to spend on lesson planning. So, curriculum mapping refers to the process of organizing and documenting what is taught, when it is taught, and how it is taught within your special education program. It involves creating a comprehensive overview or a map of your curriculum, which outlines learning goals, objectives, content, instructional methods, as well as assessments. So here are some steps to understand how curriculum mapping can be used. Number one is to identify the desired learning outcomes. Begin by determining a specific knowledge, skills, or ability you want your students to acquire by the end of your academic year. So here is where I would make sure and consider you aligning your curriculum with your state standards, your alternate standards, whatever you may have in place, as well as the individual needs of the students who are in your classroom. Number two is to break down that curriculum into units or topics. Divide that curriculum into a logical unit or themes. And then within each of those units, you're going to identify key topics and concepts that you need to cover. So this helps you stay organized and your content is covered in a sequence of learning experiences that is effective and efficient. Number three is to determine the instructional strategies and resources that you're going to use. Decide on your teaching methods, materials, and resources that will be used to deliver the content and engage your students in that learning. So you're going to consider all your differentiated instruction to meet all your diverse needs of your students. And then number four is to plan for assessment. And this could be both formal and informal. So think test, projects, portfolios, or even observations, exit slips, those kinds of things to make sure you're keeping a pulse on what is being taught, how it's being understood, and if those learning objectives are being met. And then number five is to create a timeline. By creating this timeline, it allows you to provide a sequence of events and duration for each of your units and your topics to help organize your curriculum throughout the whole year to make sure that everything is covered. So some benefits of this curriculum mapping that we're discussing is number one, you're going to get clear on your instructional guidelines. You know what is expected for the grade levels that you're teaching. Number two, you're going to align your standards. By mapping the curriculum, special education teachers can ensure that the instruction aligns to the standards that are being taught and that the objectives are equivalent to what it needs to be reviewed and taught for that year. It helps maintain accountability and support student achievement. Number three is to individualized instruction for the learners that you have on your caseload during the year. That can include accommodations. It can include prepping different modifications or adaptations to help better meet all of the learners' needs. Number 4 is collaboration and coordination among your different educators that work with your learners. And this is across all the different grade levels, ensuring that coherent and sequential education experiences are made for your students. And then number 5 is data-driven decisions in the making. By mapping your curriculum, it helps with collecting and analyzing your data as well as your students' performance and their progress. The data can inform your instructional decisions, identify areas that need to be targeted for improvement, as well as support evidence-based interventions in your special education program. So overall, curriculum mapping is a valuable tool for special education teachers to plan, implement, and assess instruction effectively. It promotes consistency, alignment, and individualization. And that then leads to improved outcomes for the special education learners that you have on your caseload. So that leads me into, I wanted to go over some of those, not only what it is, how we can use it, but some examples of it. But I think so many times a lot of us are visual learners. So I wanted to show you kind of in real life what that can look like and where you get that information. So join me the next few minutes to just kind of walk you through kind of my process. And I have a podcast episode about it where I actually talk with Heather from Full Sped Ahead about the importance of curriculum mapping and how to get started. So if you want some extra tips there, make sure and check that out. And I believe she has a blog post as well. So let me share my screen. So what I ultimately do is, I think it's very important, first off, here we go, to know so to know your standards, right? A lot of times that's kind of assumed, but what I do is I take this year-long curriculum map, and what I do is I print it off and have them side by side, and I have all the months that I'm in school and all the different subject areas or areas that we're going to target this year. And so when I spread this out, this is in my lesson plan template that's in my TPT store, but I then take this, and you could even print 2 copies, but you'll see where I'm going in just a minute. But ultimately I take this and I use a pencil because you may have to do a little bit of erasing to get everything done. Next, after you have kind of this sheet, and you could just do some lines and boxes and have the months at the top of the year. It doesn't have to be this form, but I'm just trying to show you just kind of how to get started. So next up would be to find your state standards. For the state I'm in, it's Alabama. So I pulled up the most recent standards for ELA. So going to just say grade level 4, my alternate standards are on my right side. So then I would kind of go through, and these are already kind of sectioned for me for like phonics or fluency or comprehension. So I would go through and make note of what the standards are, how they may build on each other, because you wouldn't necessarily want to get to metaphors before maybe going over like high fluency words and some comprehension and having some like time to build up some of that background knowledge. So you may not want to teach this standard until, maybe second semester, but you're taking time to look at what the standards are and how many there are so that you can make sure that you're taking time to teach the skill. I think I already counted up before I got on this session, and there's actually 25, and we typically have 36 weeks in our school year. And so what I would do here is make sure and make notes. So like these questions would probably be targeted a lot of times in our reading circle time, but then we could monitor it during individual or progress monitoring time. But you kind of go through and check all the different standards of what you need to cover. And then you would go back to this page with these standards pulled up, and you would start penciling in the ELA standards that you would want taught in August. So that may look like, we're going to just start off with a key detail from the text in August. Okay. So you would take the standard, and you could take the whole thing if you needed to, and anything else you may need to do. So you may need to have 3 or 4 objectives per month in order to get all 25 of them covered. So then you would find 2 more that you may need to teach during that month, and you would fill it in August. And then you would kind of go, September, find a few more, and kind of build on from there. And if there's any that you're going to just cover every single day, you may even want to make note of like a maintenance one that's going to go in several different months. So you would fill this out as you go through your different standards. So this identifying details from something presented by a speaker. This may actually apply when you're going on a lot of your different community trips and someone's talking about whatever the place that you are visiting. And then when you come back to school, the kids can recount, whether that is through picture, whether that is through words or their AAC device or whatever. So maybe a month where you've actually already gone on a couple and had practice, then you may want to cover that in November, and have them describe it to where that standard is taken care of. But you wouldn't necessarily want to do that at the very beginning when you're not going on field trips or not having that practice before. So ultimately, you fill this out with all 25 of your standards. You go all the way to May. If you go into June, you would add a column there too. These are all editable, so you can tweak it as you need. Once you've gone through all your standards for the grade or grades that you are teaching, then what you would do is then take that same information and then kind of put it into a monthly view. So then you would list all the things you're covering for August in week 1, 2, 3, 4, and if there's a 5th week, you would kind of break down that information here with just that one, standard or target that you're working on an ELA. Do the same thing for math and science. So then this is just your monthly overview. This could be what you turn into your principal, but then you could take information like this and either do like a weekly focus sheet or a weekly lesson plan of the objectives that you are doing with just those specific standards. And by having this kind of setup or model, you're ensuring that you're at least teaching the skills that are being asked for you to teach for the grade levels that you are covering, as well as taking time to still provide some maintenance skills on other things. I know this is kind of a pacing guide that I've created for some of the alternate standards that I've done that same thing that we just talked about, where we break down the standards, but I also kind of break it down into a skill set. So kind of breaking down the WH question standards, pairing all those together, whether it's fictional, informational, those kinds of things, and then the main idea. And so this would be broken down for your different skills for the standards that you are being asked to teach. So that would be just an example of how to cover the standards for the grade levels, how you can break it down, and what it could look like, as far as so that you could have it really just on a sheet. And then what I do is I have it all on one page for the week. But I take that time at the beginning of the year or even in the summer to kind of go over the different standards and spread them out for the grade levels that I am teaching to to ensure that I'm at least touching on that, but you're also working on some of those maintenance skills or those IEP goals that may not directly align with that, but you're working on those too. So that then leads me into the next question is, what do people use for lesson plans? Well, in what I was just showing you is I have several different, like a variety of different types of templates set up there so that no matter what you're looking for, if your school requires certain elements for your lesson plans to include, you could definitely include those in in there again, I can just briefly show you um, here. So I like to use either the week at a glance, the weekly focus sheet, or this lesson plan to where you can kind of scribble in your different activities. Like if you have cooking on Friday, what are things you may need to ask for on Monday, those kinds of things. But then you have an area for your objectives. But it's just kind of finding one that works for you in the grade level. What I used in preschool looks totally different than what I used in elementary school, which is totally different than what I used at the intermediate school. So that's why there's some different options. And then there are different templates for the different types of sessions you may have throughout the day to where you do have the ability to take data. And they do even have some options for daily notes for your different small groups or rotations or just your data. If you are a self-contained teacher or you're teaching extended school year, there's also some templates there for you. But this just makes sure that you're including everything, especially when you have your different grade levels and your different kids and who you're seeing on what days. So that's one way you can do it. I know that there are a variety of different other programs. I think there's the lesson plan book. There are other things that you can actually download off of Teachers Pay Teachers for different lesson plan templates. I also have that digital planner that has you could actually save all these forms as a PNG and write straight on them in a digital form or on a Google Sheets. So those are all different options for lesson plans. I know I typically take what I just showed you and have it in it's a Google Sheet, not a Google Doc, which is what Brittany was saying that that works best for her. But by doing it in a sheet and then the text boxes, I can then duplicate it every week. And then I take that and save it as a PDF and I upload it to my Google Drive, which is where I have to turn in my lesson plans every week. So that way I'm working kind of smarter, not harder. It's already all set up. And then I'm just inputting the new standards that we're going to teach or what activities we're going to do. So I hope that helps. And then Jordan was asking about with so many standards and how they overlap or they build on top of each other. In the high school setting, she struggles because her department's so small. So she's going to have health and safety, earth, space, science, and she's supposed to cover all those different things within the same period. And while she does have some paras, like how do you get all that done? Well, first of all, I would look at your different standards, see if there is any overlap, and see how many standards you're supposed to be covering for the time period that you're. Is it a full semester? Is it just a 9 weeks that you're teaching this? Knowing how long your time frame is and how many standards need to be taught, and you may need to set that up, especially for special ed in like rotations to where maybe the kids that are doing the health and safety, you may have to have a small group and teach that with your objectives there, teaching a standard or two, and then send them off with an activity or some practice to do with that, and then taking time to go over your next kind of class of earth space science and teach that, send them off with an activity and check back on the other. And then you could even swap that. So then Tuesday, you do earth space science, you teach them first, and you have the other kids working on activities. And so that they're both getting kind of the best version of you, and you're still teaching everything because you've looked at it ahead of time, built out that curriculum map. And if there is anything that overlaps between the two, you take the time to kind of do that together as a whole group as well. But by having that rotation, it would allow you to teach both. I know it kind of crams it all in probably into a short period of time, whether that is, 60 minutes, 70 minutes. But by taking maybe 20 minutes to teach one of them and getting them set up in an activity and then doing another 20 minutes. So that would allow you to reach both classes or both types of courses that you're supposed to be teaching within that time period, and still giving them activities that would help reinforce that skill that you are trying to teach them, and still give you a little bit of time for assessments and that kind of thing. So that was it really for the questions this week. I hope that it was helpful. And if you do have more questions about it, feel free to leave questions below. Or if you have questions about what we talked about today, I don't mind expounding any from here. So leave those down below too for anything that I may have shown. But ultimately, it sounds kind of daunting to curriculum map on the front end, but it really does help set the pace for the rest of the year. And I can't encourage you to do that enough. And that if that is something that you need more help with, let me know below, and let's work through that to help you feel confident to kind of start the year off on the right track and find a lesson plan that works for the needs of your particular class, the needs of your particular school, and kind of go from there. If you do like those templates, make sure and check those out over on TPT, and we can kind of work from there. So I hope this is helpful, and I will see you at the next live.